Hello and welcome. This is episode 4 of a book review series within their podcast Engineer to Manager. I'm your host, Alex Maestrenko. In this podcast, we are diving into the essence of engineering management. Apart from the interviews, we also talk about different engineering management related books. Today's guest is Cate Huston. Kate has been a guest on the podcast like 1.5 years ago. So, Kate, welcome back. I'm happy to have you, and I'm happy to have our book
thank you.
That you wrote.
It's great to be back, and I'm still very excited every time an actual human being reads my book.
I hope to have this book one day signed by you. Hope we could meet her in person, but today we are going through the details of the book. So the book is super fresh. It has been released like April this year, April 2024. It's released by O'Reilly, and I bought this book because we had a conversation with Kate previously. I liked and it was interesting to hear your empathy to the team that popped up during our conversation, and I was interested to see how it evolved to this book.
Yeah, well, I hope to get to visit you in Ukraine someday once you're liberated.
More than welcome.
Yeah.
So for those who are just listening, the book is called The Engineering Leader, Strategies for Scaling Teams and Yourself. Kate, let us go through the structure of the book. So the book is structured in 3 parts.
It's in 2 halves, really.
In 2 halves,
yeah, the first half is about you. And the second half is about the teams that you lead. And then each of those halves is in half again. So the first, the you section is about firstly, just your career. And this is supposed to be applicable to really everybody. But it's very hard to give people what you don't have yourself, So if you're a manager, you probably need to start thinking critically about your own career before you start helping other people think critically about their career. And then in the second half of the second quarter, that's about what I'm calling self-management. So basically, the more you go up the org chart, the less you have somebody who understands your job, who can tell you what to do. And so you really need to start figuring that out for yourself. So what is self-management? How do you manage your energy when it's a bigger constraint than your time? How do you figure out your leadership style and expand it? So those are the kind of questions that are in that bit. And then in the second half of the book, it's about scaling teams, which is very much like a people-centric view of scaling teams. And then there's getting teams to be self-improving, which is more every team exists for a purpose. So what are they trying to deliver? How do you get them better at delivering the value that they're supposed to provide?
It's very interesting that you first focus on the person and then focus on the team, because I've reviewed their book from Sarah Drosner recently, and she focuses on you, on the person, in the end of the book. So she does the opposite.
Yeah.
And it also makes sense, right? Depending on their approach and on the state where you are. So why did you decide to start with you as a person in the middle?
I just think you can't give what you don't get. So I feel like there's this failure mode of managers where they orient themselves around the team. They're trying to be useful to the team. They're trying to provide value. And then they're wow, I feel like absolute garbage. I'm exhausted. Why is that? It's I don't know. I think this is quite predictable. If we start with you as a human being, then it's what do you need to be effective in this? And I think it's also important that we recognize that even if we lead a team and we feel very responsible for them, it doesn't mean that we don't have certain needs and interests of our own, right? And as a leader, you're more likely to need to take on for the team than average, don't be that person who doesn't do that ever. But if you default to doing that always and you're never critical about it, then you'll just end up in a bad situation, which is something I think I've seen over and over again with really well-intentioned new managers. They're trying to do a great job, and actually they need somebody to be hey, don't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm, right? So if you have a good manager there with a fire extinguisher for you, that's good. But many of us don't get it, right? And so then it's what do you need to do? You need to know how to manage yourself before you can manage other people.
As a good book, and well, I do think this is a good book. When you read, you realize and you have aha moments, right? When you see, okay, this is indeed what has been meant, and then I have never thought about it. And one of the thoughts, just following what you just said, is that you basically have not only to calculate your time that you use for your work, but also the energy and managing your energy. So when you're back home and they're talking to your spouse about the work, then it's your energy that you are using for the work, right? When you're going for a hike on a weekend and you're still thinking about the work, it's still the energy that you invest in your work. So it typically goes way beyond 40 hours. And I think, I personally never thought about this way. I thought, okay, so there are 40 hours or whatever hours that I'm doing on the computer or talking to people, right? But there are energies that I spend outside of kind of delivering the work. I never calculate, never count it. So it's taking care of you and having this big picture of the whole commitment that you have for the work. That's really nicely put in the book.
Oh, thank you. I think it's also like, is that energy helpful? Because if, I've been trying, like, because it's summer here, so in Ireland, it's a very long, damp winter. So I'm like trying to go outside more. And so if I go for a walk and I kind of take my work with me on that walk and I kind of come to a place of clarity about it, that's actually very productive. And maybe I come back and I do something in 20 minutes that I might otherwise have spent 2 hours staring at a screen. That's great, right? But if I'm out at a bar with my friends and instead of talking about whatever we want to talk about, I'm just being like, oh my God, my boss did this, my peer did that. Like, no, that's not productive. It's not constructive. Maybe it's cathartic. It makes me feel better. But at some point, you have to be like, do you make these problems bigger by giving them more energy outside of work? And like, this is one of the things that, I also write in the book is like, increasingly when it comes to this idea of like work-life balance, I'm not convinced we get there by doing less work. I think we get there by doing more life.
Nice satire. And once you have, you wrote this about this in your book, how you wrote actually the book. So sometimes when you read the book, you say, okay, oh, well, that's how Kate approached it, and how you approached as a project. And after writing the book, did you get more life in your life? If you can share that.
So much more life. My weekends back, I'm like so excited. It's amazing. I started going to like in-person yoga classes. Oh. Which yeah, well, like not regular yoga, like weird yoga where you like hang upside down like a bat, so it's like worth going in person for. But like, this was the kind of thing that I just couldn't contemplate doing when I was trying to write a book. Like, I didn't want more schedule. Yeah, I went and made new friends. Like, we took a huge trip. We went to Hong Kong and Australia for a friend's wedding in Bali. Like, yeah, like so much more life now the book is done. So, yeah, my partner definitely doesn't want me writing another one anytime soon. Who could blame me?
Nice. Well, nice. But what has been the initial motivation for you to start writing this book?
I think I finally felt like I had a book-sized amount of stuff to say. So that was a big one. And then I think there's this other thing of like, as a woman in a male-dominated industry, I don't always get full credit for my work. And so having my receipts is always like much more helpful to me. So like having a book is like a huge long form receipt, I guess. So
when you say that you have enough or you had enough material for the book, did you stack up some experience, or how did you realize that you have it here? So you like have it in written, or what happened? What was the preparation?
I think it was more that I just got to a point where I realized that I had this book-sized message and how I wanted to structure it. And so I kind of spent a year on that message and making sure that there was enough there. And then I did the book proposal, got the book deal. And then I did this it was like 50% writing, 50% editing for the first 6 months, and then just editing. So I think maybe I did too much work in the first year in some ways. Like, it wasn't necessarily the right work, but it was what I felt that I needed to do to like convince myself that I could write a book.
And are you happy with the result yourself, or are you still like critical, like I could have done something better in this chapter 15 on the page, or 39 or whatever?
I didn't feel like that, but he's suggesting I should. I think, at some point, a project this big, you just have to let it go, and it is what it is, and I think especially, obviously it's like a business book, but also just in anything that is in some ways an art, a piece of art, then people are who they are in relationship to it. so it doesn't really matter what I think of it at some point. It matters what you think of it, and what you get out of it, and anybody else who reads it. So I tried to be a good manager in my day job, and I take a very few coaching clients on the side, and I really value that. And this book was a way for me to give some of the things that I try and give in those contexts in a more scaled way, and so there's no way to know how useful it is now, right? Like I will know in 2 or 3 years how useful it's been to people. And at some point, I just kind of feel this like I gave the book to the world and they get to do what they want with it. And I'm moving on to whatever's next for me.
But you already get their feedback, the one that I'm giving one today to you, and also on your LinkedIn, lots of people are posting their photo with a book so how does it feel?
I mean, it feels amazing. I just feels like there's just 2 years of my life spent excavating this giant hole. And then every time somebody does something like that, it's like they threw a handful of dirt in. I feel a bit like I excavated part of my soul to write this book. And so every time somebody says something nice, it fills it in. But I'm trying to free myself a little bit from the need to fill in that hole immediately. Do you know what I mean? I think the more useful thing is how it fills in over time and what people get from it. And I want it to be something that somebody like you comes back to in 2 years and you read it again. You've forgotten how to do self-management because work's been so busy. And then you come back and you're like, oh, okay, all these things. I had all these tools. I've practiced all these tools. And that's kind of the dream of it, is that it's a bit more of a companion for you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you recommend this book for your colleagues, or kind of discuss it with your colleagues, or because colleagues are those with whom you work on a daily basis, right? And you basically show how to apply their techniques, the approaches from the book in your daily life or in your professional career, right? And do you kind of discuss, show, and or connect with the book in your work?
I think some of them are reading it. I feel awkward pushing it at work, but definitely some of my directs are reading it. One of them started giving it to his directs to be like, well, I could talk to you about this, but you could just read this chapter in Kate's book. So that's great. It's helping him scale.
When we talk about their chapters, do you have any favorite one?
I think my favorite chapter might be the one on hiring, just because I wrote down my whole playbook. This is... I think it is possible to hire well and humanely. And I've just long found many of the conversations about hiring really frustrating. And so this was that. I mean, that's probably the longest chapter in the book, but I just had the opportunity to lay it all out. This is how it should be done. And it is the most tactical chapter in the book. So it's weird that it's my favorite. But it is also one that I fought for. The third section in the book, in the first incarnation of the book proposal, people didn't understand why it was there. And so I had to take that feedback and go away with it because I felt that it was critically important and I needed to represent why it was critically important.
What I really like about the book in some chapters where you put a framework for different approaches, and then you basically describe all the approaches in the same way and say this is how you take care of yourself, this is other things. So you basically drive and put the framework for the people. And do you have this framework for the hiring as well? The
whole chapter is a framework for hiring, but I don't think somebody needs to take all of it. They can take the pieces of it in the order that they're most useful to you. I think the hiring one is a selfish version of the favorite one. And if I was the one that I think is my favorite for other people is probably the self-management chapter in section 2 and the energy management and the trap of being useful. There's just so much stuff in there that I feel is this is stuff that people really need.
When we talk about self-management, you showed me this postcard that you had for the trip. Stop climbing, start DRIing DRIing and basically being directly responsible individual, right?
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about their build teams at scale? Whoa.
Yeah. I had this artist make them because I did a talk recently. Oh, here's one.
Develop your strategy. You have all the raccoons on all the postcards.
Well, raccoons are the best animals, yeah. So there we go. This one's my favorite.
Your leadership style. Oh, nice.
Yeah,
nice.
I can send you one if you want.
I would appreciate it. It would be great.
I got totally distracted with you. No question. What was your question?
So basically, we talked a little bit about Diing here, and basically you start the book about with being directly responsible individual, thinking about your career, thinking about your steps, and I want to go together with you through the concept that you described there, because I'm not sure all the listeners read about the book, and I want them to show the depths so that they are intrigued to get the whole book and the whole version and the whole thing. So what do you mean by when you say start DRIing? What do you mean by that?
Well, okay, so to come back to the postcards, they were built on a talk I gave recently where I started off by talking about, there are these raccoons that I love to follow on Instagram, and they're very, very pampered, They're like well taken care of. They're living their best lives. And then there's the like raccoons in Toronto, which are kind of like feral and pitted against the government, who's just trying to make a kind of bin that will starve the raccoons. But the government is, of course, failing, right? Because raccoons are very highly motivated. And I think in the kind of tech market's been in a bit of a shift, And so my kind of overarching metaphor in this talk was like, look, we were pampered Instagram raccoons, and now we live in Toronto, and we've got to get our shit together.
Nice.
So
nice.
This kind of relates to the DRI thing, because I think, when tech was like abundant and there was a lot of like treats and incentives, it's like, like it was easier to get promoted. It was easier to get, training, like money for coaching, whatever it was you wanted. Like retention was like it was very competitive to hire, then companies worked really hard on retention. And now this is not the market. This has not been the market for about 2 years. And so it's much harder to get promoted. It is much harder to get money for training. It is like much harder to job hunt in this market, right? Like it's very hard to be on the market now. And, if you're kind of coming to this mindset of like, we live in Toronto now, like, what do you need to do with that? Because you need to take charge and start trying to break into the garbage bins. Like, nobody is going to prepare you a gourmet snack, right? And that's really what I mean by, like, be the DRI, right? When I talk about, like, stop climbing, start DRIing, it's like there are many people who have their concept of career growth is getting promoted. And that just gives away all your power. And also, you don't know if you would like doing the next job, And so you're just like climbing this ladder and not thinking about like, do you actually like it? Will you really enjoy it when you get there? What are you learning? And so again, like DRIing is like taking charge of what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, what you're getting out of it. We live under capitalism. Money is nice, but like money is not worth your entire happiness, especially when it's like a differential, So you want to kill yourself getting promoted, make 10 grand more a year. The government takes half of it in tax. And then you're like, oh shit, I hate my job. Like, that's just like, that's not a great path for anybody, and like thinking critically about it, like maybe it's worth it to you, but also maybe it's not. But if you give away all your power and you just see your progression as the org chart and what the company says is valuable or not, then you're not making your own decisions. You're not thinking about what you actually value, what you actually enjoy, and how you want to grow.
What you're saying is basically is not only connected with the market. Market is kind of a initiator for this change of thinking, or there are the concepts that you're describing, right? Because previously you could have thought the same way, and you could have evaluated your path the same way as you are saying right now.
Yeah, I thought this before the market, but in this market shift, I think it's even more important.
So basically the market is kind of pushing for you to make the right choice, meaning the right choice for you and making it consciously.
Yeah, exactly. But also just kind of not seeing your value as the value under capitalism.
Okay, well, they're nice, and basically you put this in the book, and the concept of the DRIing, and this comes in the very beginning, as far as I remember from the book, right? It's a section 1 actually, right? Their whole section is about DRIing your career. Just to be a little bit more precise, so it's comes from their following chapters: career decision and optimization, what we just discussed, then setting and executing on career goals, basically thinking what are the goals and how do they match, or how do they see yourself in the future, and that basically changes their way we all think about a very kind of stupid HR question, like where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? Because if you look from this position, that the decision that you're making right now influence your future. It's not a stupid question. Try to think it from the other way around. Then embracing growth and moving forward. Basically, they're steps in this section that show you the foundation of DRIing your career.
Yeah, and your relationship with feedback as well, which I think is really important. The easier it is for people to give you feedback, the more you do with feedback, the more you can grow.
You put a very simple words, like 80 pages of your book. So if you were dear listeners or viewers, if you want to go in more details, or just go and grab the book from whatever you're buying your books for. It's available online in lots of shops. Kate, is there anything that you would like to dive a little bit more other part of the book?
Well, what was your favorite chapter?
I liked their yourself and basically the beginning was, as I said, their energy management. It struck me a lot because with their career, fine. With team building, fine. We all have various experience, but their energy management was like, okay, what you get paid for and what you give to your work. That was a very interesting systematic approach, right? So let me find this part. Basically, when you talk, that you have to think what you give to the company, right? And what the company pays you for. Mm-hmm. And we are at least, I think lots of people are thinking, I'm bringing my effort, I'm spending my time, and they pay me money for this. But the energy part, their brand part that you also mentioned, their connectivity with their NDA, NCA that you get, basically you cannot speak publicly or then go to their other company or once you sign the NDA, NCA. Mm-hmm. And then it's also the part of the deal with your company or your workplace. Mm-hmm. And they're we all have been through this part, but I never thought about that systematically. Oh
yeah, that's great. I think when I initially started writing about these ideas on my blog, like this was one of the things that resonated most for people. Like, what does your employer rent versus what do they buy? Basically,
evaluating and making the choice is also important when you have this all written down or put it in a systematic way. You can understand whether this is the right place for you or for future you, and how long do you have to stay here, how long can you stay here to achieve your goals. And then basically you return back to their DRIing and saying, okay, where do I want to be, and whether there things that are being paid that I'm giving that the company is renting, whether they are corresponding. Yes, it's very easy and it's very nice to talk about higher goals and high materials, but when we come to the market, we all see, and you also already mentioned, that the market is not that easygoing and it's very harsh. Mm-hmm. So one thing that I was like, okay, having to process how to apply what I read here to the real market. Because if you start, okay, well, I don't want to go there because they don't make my pass, but then, okay, but I have to pay my rent, I have to pay other thing that I have, and kind of, okay, possibly kind of trying to find the balance where you have to give up, and the balance where you have to push and kind of find the approach that you describe here in the book. That's a very interesting thing, actually.
Oh, cool. Yeah, no, I'm glad you like that bit. I think it's like really important to me to communicate in that like I don't have any judgment for people. Like I won't be like, this is what your career should be, this is what you should be doing. Like there's no, like those are your decisions. But like all I'm trying to help people do is to make mindful decisions. Because I'll tell you, like as a hiring manager, when I'm interviewing people and I can see they've done the same like 1 year of experience 5 times over, I feel so sad for them. And I don't think they didn't do that deliberately. You know, they didn't have awareness of what they were doing. And now I see how it's just going to make it really hard for them to move forward. And so there's just parts of like a career growth conversation that just need to be made more available to people and more accessible to people. And this is something I wanted to do.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. Like 5 years, the same thing every year, and you don't really realize that you're repeating. Basically, you think, okay, well, I have the experience, and then I can apply it to the next project, product, whatever is on the plate. But kind of start thinking what I'm doing better or different, right? Because different is not always better, but can I try different things? And then it brings additional experience. And this is a good part from the book where it pushes you to think and kind of step back and think about your career. And indeed, you're more giving the framework as far as in the book, and not like, okay, go to Facebook or go to DuckDuckGo, whatever company, but rather you don't even talk about the sizes of the company as far as I remember. So you're saying like some books, like I reviewed the book by Orosh, their newsletter author, and he describes all the different types of the companies, all the different careers, kind of giving the setup to think, but you're giving this up to the reader for them to analyze their situation and giving the framework for the decision, not their state of the market. And that's what they're interested in this particular book.
Yeah, I mean, companies change, right? Like, I'm sure he did a great job of writing the state of the companies when he wrote it, but I'm also sure that many of them are different already. But the kind of questions I want to ask are a little bit more timeless, you know, and that every person should not just have different answers at, you know, like if we ask 10 people, they should all have different answers today, but those 10 people should all have different answers 1 year, 2 years from now. If
we have to choose one phrase from the book that we can put in the title of this video, what would it be?
Stop climbing, start DIYing.
That's the one.
Now I'll send you a postcard.
Yeah, all right. Thank you very much. I think we went through the most parts. We went through how the book is structured. We covered the first part about yourself. The part about management, dear listeners, just go and get that book. It's worth it, absolutely worth it. And basically, thank you, Kate, for joining me for this conversation.
Oh, thanks so much for having me again. I hope we get to talk again soon. And yeah, it's always a pleasure to see you.
Same, likewise. Dear listeners, don't forget to like and subscribe this video, and also tell in the comments below how do you like the book once you read it, or what are your favorite parts. And when you share it online, Kate is reposting and having this very nice connection with the readers. And basically, well, you can tag Kate with a book with the photos on LinkedIn. She shares all the photos, and it's very nice of you to get this connection with the readers.
Oh, cool. Thank you so much. Have a great day.